This is Alabama Politics with Steve Flowers, an in-depth interview with Alabama's top political newsmakers. Now, from the studios of Troy University, here is Steve Flowers.
I'm Steve Flowers, and welcome to Alabama Politics. Folks, we got a special program tonight. We've got a duo, two of the most powerful, popular, and my favorite state senators from here in Montgomery, Senator Kirk and Senator Will Barfoot are our guests. They came together. I asked, they're on every year just about, and I was talking with Senator Hatcher earlier in the session, during the last session. He says, let me have my friend Will Barfoot on there. And so we got them on together today, a Republican from Pike Road and a Democrat from Montgomery.
And friends on top of that.
All the friends get along. That's so good because you don't have that in every delegation. You know, you've got a lot of partisan discord. And we were talking prior to the show, a similar situation has occurred in Jefferson, and y'all have seen this in y'all's time in the legislature. During my time, even before there was a Democratic or Republican divide, just the Jefferson County delegation would be in turmoil. Well, you know, but like Will said before the show, you know, if they get together, they got a pretty big stick. That's 25% of the legislature, probably. Yeah. If you combine Shelby, if you consider Shelby and maybe St. Clair,
that's right,
part of their delegation, they've got a pretty big stick. But that's good. Y'all need to work together for the Montgomery River region.
You know, one of the exciting things I have to, and thank you for having us. And you know, one of the reasons, other than what is real in terms of my relationship to Senator Barfoot, is I think people need to see that in a hyper partisan society that we're living in right now, that there are, you know, those of us who absolutely, not only in terms of the ability to work together for the people of the state of Alabama, and also, you know, and primarily the people we serve, but also to put out there for those in the surrounding areas that we can disagree without being disagreeable, and that you can have the kind of robust debates that take place often with us, both within the chamber and within the office space, and to still be able to walk out of that space as friends and brothers. And I thank God for the fact that that we do have, you know, that kind of relationship. I don't have an issue, you know, reaching out to Brother Barfoot on any issue, and I hope likewise. I believe that's the same. And we have other colleagues, you know, in the Senate body who we share that bond with. You know,
well, y'all got more in common than you do different, because your first job, even though you're a state senator, is to look after your area.
Yep.
I mean, you got to think, well, the folks in Montgomery, or the folks in Pike Road and East Montgomery and Elmore and Crenshaw, I got to think about what's good for them, not what's good for the Republican Democratic Party. And I think both of y'all have a reputation for doing that. You think first about your constituents, second about party. And I've had people come up to me that didn't know you and I were good friends in the Senate on the Republican side, say you are the brightest star in the Democratic Party because you have such an amenable personality. You don't wear a partisan hat. Jabbo told me that. I was talking to him. We spent a lot of time together. I'm doing a book thing for Jabbo, and we talked about the show how he and Smithman have worked together for the good of Jefferson County. But he brought you up individually one time about that, and I said he didn't know you and I were good friends, so he wasn't trying to do that because of that.
That's a high honor coming from
him. It was not just Jabbo. It was somebody else said the same thing to me.
You know, I don't know if I told you that Senator Wagner, my initial interactions with him was former Speaker McCutcheon assigned me to the task force on direct wine shipment, and Senator Wagner chaired that task force. I knew nothing about, as I call it, Jesus juice, and so we learned a couple of things there together, and you know, the work that we did turned into legislation, right? And one of the things that happened, he came down to, I was in the House at the time, he came down to the House looking for me. And there were folk, I had no idea, I knew about Senator Wagner, but I didn't know that he carried this incredibly high honor and respect among all of the legislators. And they said for Senator Wagner to come down from on high looking for, and I was somewhere milling around. Long story short, I ended up going upstairs looking for him, got to his office. Michael was there, of course,
Yeah.
and one of the things that we bonded over was this old Gaither hymn entitled "Sweet, Sweet Spirit," which I love, and we almost started to humming the song together in the office. I remember that, and that was before I was elected to the Senate, and he was encouraging then because I never put, my thing is that you keep running until they count all of the votes, and so my thinking that this thing is always questionable. He said no. I'll see you on the other side of the victory.
That's funny you bring up that singing with Jabbo, because I have gotten real close to him because I've been writing this biography since September, and I go to church with him. He has a long history in the Homewood Church of Christ, and he doesn't wear it on his sleeve. But Jabbo is a very, very religious person, and he's a sort of a disciple for his church. He calls me almost every Saturday and says, "Will you go to church with me tomorrow?" I said, "Okay, about once a month." He's got his own area, but he's got deep roots in the Church of Christ. He comes from his ancestors that came down from Tennessee, but his daughter married the song leader in that church, and his son-in-law is a song leader in the church, Homewood Church of Christ, and he will, but he sings that same song. And you have that heritage in your church with your background, having been a song person since you were little in your church. What's your church's? You go the same one you were born and raised in?
Well, I was, Pilgrim Rest Baptist Church here.
Where do you go to church, Will?
At Thornton Road Baptist.
That's out there close to you at Pike Road.
Yeah, fairly close.
But they sing all the old songs in Jabbo's church. In a Homewood Church of Christ, they sing the real old song. You don't see them sing anymore.
No.
I mean, the songs we grew up listening to, Amazing Grace, and that sort of thing, you don't see that much anymore.
With the real meaning.
Tell our viewers again, Will, do you know how he grew up in that church singing and everything?
Well, I know he can sing, I guarantee you.
Well, I remember coming up here when Representative McClammy passed away.
Yeah.
And the ladies, every person I saw in Montgomery said, "You're friends with Kirk Hatcher, aren't you?" I said, "Yeah." Said, "You won't believe the song he sang at McClammy's funeral. It's like all they want to talk about was your singing at his funeral."
That was a song he requested?
Tell our viewers again how you grew up when you sing. Will, you ever heard how he...
Oh, I've heard it.
Tell it, if you will, about when you were a little boy.
I do a little chirping. But
I asked the question, I interrupted. Do you go to the same church you grew up in?
I rarely get there because I'm always someplace else on a Sunday. But it is the church that, my mother was born and raised in. Look, when they were baptizing him in Jenkins Brickyard here in Montgomery, in North Montgomery, and didn't have a baptismal, pool. That church, which is now, a mega church. I was 5 years old when I first started singing publicly, and no one in my family knew that I could sing. I didn't know. I was on an Easter program. And I was supposed to get a little one-liner like everybody else, something like Easter Lily, boys and girls don't be so silly. And I ended up singing. And the song that I sang, I remember to this day, was "I Know It Was the Blood That Saved Me." And it was very important later on in life to remember that, because those same deacons, because my mom and dad had not married, and never did. And back in those days,
that was unusual.
Look, first of all, it was frowned upon. Unwed mother, and so Mama had to go before the Board of Deacons and apologize for conceiving me out of wedlock.
How old are you now, Kirk?
59. And she.
You're 55 or something, aren't you?
52.
52, yeah.
And so but it never deterred her, and it was always interesting for her to tell me what the gentleman who was chair of the deacon board at the time, Deacon Elliott Curry, and Mom had always been active in the church, all of them. They were not, pew members, they were ushers and singing in the choir. And when he came to her, and I still don't know at this point whether she had given birth or whether or not, I think she had given birth already. And he comes to her, because she was still going to church. He says, "Gal, when you coming back to church?" And what he meant is, you got to come before the Board of Deacons.
In a private meeting, not in the church.
No, just the Board of Deacons.
Yeah.
You know, but imagine that.
They didn't make her come before the congregation.
She was 22.
Uh-huh.
My dad was 29, didn't have to do that.
Your mother was a very famous seamstress, wasn't she?
Still is.
Still working.
Still is. Still is. And so she had to, but the beautiful thing about that story that I was reminded of like a year ago, is that same kid whose mother had to suffer that kind of embarrassment, that 5 years later,
sing that song.
You're singing the song, "I Know It Was the Blood That Saved Me."
That's awesome.
Isn't it?
Now, what's your church's name?
Pilgrim Rest.
Is it one of the biggest Baptist churches?
Yeah.
Where did Thad go to church?
Day Street.
Okay,
Baptist.
you sang at his funeral, and everybody still talks about that.
He wanted the song, "May the work I've done speak for me."
Now, is his daughter still in his house seat, Penny?
They still have the house, but
No,
she had a house.
She in his house seat.
Oh, house seat. Yes.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
House
Doing a great
seat.
job. Doing a wonderful job.
Uh-huh. Who took your house seat? That's not the one Hassel's in, is it?
Kenyatta Hassel.
Okay,
Right.
okay.
Right.
Hey, Kirk, I'll tell you something about that. You talking about you have to go to other churches now for politics. Do you have to do that too? I used to have to do that when I was in legislature.
No.
I'd go to every church in Pike County, because
Well, you had relatives at every
Yeah,
church
right.
in Pike County.
That's what Mac told me.
Yeah.
Mac.
Anyway, but you can go to your own church. But you have to go to other churches.
Well, I don't have to.
But you do for
But I end
political.
up, in different places, even out of the city.
Let me tell you something about that. I'll tell you. John Lewis is from my county.
That's right.
John is from Pike County, up around Banks.
That's right.
And his mom was one of my best supporters. All of his family still lives there. All the Lewises still live there, and they're all friends of mine and were supporters of mine. His mom was one of my favorite people, and she went to a little country church called Antioch up around Banks. Antioch Baptist Church. Lewis McMillan was the preacher. Can you imagine how popular John Lewis was in Atlanta? He would come home to Pike County when he was the height of his congressional career and go to church with his mama.
I believe it.
2 or 3 times a month.
I believe it.
Now, I really not thought about it because can you imagine how many demands he had on his time to go to churches in Atlanta, Georgia, being as popular and well known as he was. He would travel to Pike County.
Yep.
He'd get over here early enough on Sunday morning. He'd come down and ask me to have breakfast at the Waffle House. He wanted to talk about Pike County politics. And so, and I'd go out to Antioch with his mama out there. To John and I were friends.
He was a humble guy.
He was.
I remember having real interaction with him when I was in school over in Atlanta. And
Morehouse man.
Yeah, and he.
No, you are. He wasn't.
That's right. He'd come to campus.
He went to school in Nashville.
Fisk.
Yeah,
He was at Fisk. And whenever I would run into him and we talk about my connection to Alabama, the last time I spoke with him, he came to Montgomery for the Faith and Politics Institute, right? And we sat there, together at Dexter Church, and then we walked across the street because Caroline Kennedy was along for that trip. And the thing I mentioned I just re-engaged with the Faith and Politics Institute recently when they came through, and I was the guest minister giving the message at First Baptist Church on Ripley, and I was sharing with Steny Hoyt and Clyburn about the last time was John Lewis was here, and we stood and talked for a while about that. We don't have individuals with that level of the common touch, who just always enjoyed being near the people and who had such a heart for servant leadership.
Well, that's why he beat Andrew Young in that congressional race. Andrew Young was a little bit aloof, and John was a man of the people.
That's it.
And that's why he went. Speaking of, tell our viewers again, you're a Morehouse man, but every major political figure in Montgomery now is a Morehouse guy. And that's not just true of Montgomery. That's why Biden went to Morehouse the other day. It's become the bellwether. You and Stephen Reed, the circuit judge Greg Griffin,
Right.
JC loves
JC.
it. JC is a,
JC loves
is a
right.
Morehouse guy, isn't he?
Right. Woodfin, Randall.
That's right. Yeah. Did y'all go over that? I actually saw Stephen Reed on television when Biden came in for the speech for Morehouse.
Yeah.
He was over there.
Well, they actually Steve was involved along with Randall with the speech committee.
Okay.
Because Cedric Richmond is also a Morehouse guy.
You taught school over there for a while before you came back home.
Not Morehouse.
No, in Atlanta school system or somewhere.
I was at Emory.
Private school. Okay.
Emory University in the School of Theology, and I definitely the main work I did, in terms of teaching here, Miami, and New York. But just seeing how, because one of the things that Representative Flowers says all the time is there's a Morehouse mafia.
Any truth to that?
There's no truth to it, none. We just love the fact that
Morehouse men.
one of the things is the person who still draws the most number of students to Morehouse is Martin Luther King Jr.
Oh yeah.
And so that legacy of people committed to serve, because we all knew that you got to go back and serve the community. And so,
gentlemen, I tell you one thing that I'll say before we move on to one more. I want to touch on the session, or y'all just finished a little bit. There were so many issues, but I'll say this before, and I'm not saying I don't tell y'all personally. These are two of my best friends in the legislature. They both came about at the same time, been there about 5 or 6 years, but both of them are so well liked in their district and doing such a good job in the state senate that they were the heir apparents to winning that new congressional seat that was drawn. So drawn about a 50-50 seat probably. But they wisely chose to stay in the state senate, which I think is a right decision, because you can do more for your people as a 50-year-old state senator, getting to live in your hometown, stay in your own bed, not fly to Washington, be one of 435.
We had those conversations.
oh yeah,
And last on the totem pole in
yes.
seniority. I mean, being one of 35 state senators, you've got a lot more influence on public policy, and you can have your own law practice or your own business, whatever you do. Go to your own church, go to your own, see people you grew up with.
Eat your mama's food.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But having said that, I'm glad y'all made the decision to stay in the state senate, and people are fortunate to have y'all representing them. But I had Senator Barfoot on last week, and we talked a little bit about the position as a Republican state senator on this lottery/gaming bill. And I'll preface this by saying I'd like to Senator Barfoot talk about his position on the lottery, because it was, even though it failed to get the 3/5 vote for constitutional amendment, y'all both voted for it, which I think was the right vote for each of your constituencies. But I told him this, that last week, that I haven't spoken to a Rotary Club in the last 5 years all over this state that the first question asked to me is, Flowers, why can't we vote on a lottery? Especially when these Powerballs come up. Y'all gonna have some of y'all's colleagues in the state senate that voted against that thing. I bet you they're getting some repercussions. I bet y'all, but I don't think your constituents thought you voted against it.
No.
But some of yours may have thought you did. Because all 15 votes in the Senate were against it. But tell our viewers your position on that whole gambling thing, how it came down and everything.
Sure. I think I told you before, I'm not the advocate for gambling. I think in a lot of ways it's bad public policy, and those who can least afford it are the ones who lose the most. But having said that, I'm also, I think Kirk and I would agree on this part, that if there is a bill that's palatable, that money's used in the right particular places to give the people of the state of Alabama an opportunity to vote on it. I've done that in the past and did that this past session, as did Kirk. And I think, the details of those bills and that legislation, whether it be the House version, what we ultimately passed out of the Senate, which was in some ways dramatically different than what the House passed, and then the conference committee report. I mean, there are three basically almost separate independent types of bills, of which the lottery was a component on each one of them, but not the only piece of that puzzle. And it seems to me that the people of the state of Alabama really, what they've been asking for is a lottery vote And, you know, it's unfortunate, I guess, in some respects, it's unfortunate that they haven't had that opportunity to vote for it yet. I suspect, though, that, you know, going forward, instead of a more comprehensive approach, you may very well see just the lottery and then the law enforcement portion of that, where makes illegal gambling, instead of misdemeanors, slap on the wrist, now makes it a felony. And those two combined may be able to get some traction.
That would get the 21 votes, wouldn't it?
Possibly.
You know, and I just like clean bills personally. But you know, ditto to what Will has said, because here's the thing. My hat's off to our friends in the House.
Ledbetter especially.
What they did, I think, was a yeoman's task. I've talked to people from years past who sought to do this. What they were able to put together was no small feat at all. It was phenomenal. And, you know, I am very disappointed that we did not get that to the people, because I do think, looking at the bill, reading the bill as carefully as I could, this was the best chance to get, you know, a really, you know, piece of legislation, I think, regarding this gaming bill to the people that I think that would be laudable, right? But I'm always optimistic. My hope is that somehow or the other we can bring that back, because I was hopeful all the way up to the last hour before we signed and died. But I do think, and I want to give our friends in the Senate who
had 20 votes.
But man, they worked.
I mean,
on this.
people don't realize it did have the majority of senators voting for it.
Right.
It just needed 3/5 for a constitutional amendment.
Right.
Needed 21, had 20. But having said that, what you're saying is that I don't think Kay Ivey has the interest or the stamina or the stomach to come with it and make it her issue. It really was Ledbetter's issue this time, and I'll speak to that a little bit in that I've seen a lot of speakers. I've been around this thing a long time, start when I was a page and I was a little boy. I saw Rankin fight, I saw Joe McCorkadale, I saw Albert Brewer, I saw, I've seen speakers going back that far. But back in the old days, the governor controlled the speaker. I mean, he picked the speaker, and it was not really Wallace picked who the speaker was. Tom Drake was speaker one time, and Wallace had told him to jump off the Capitol and say, "What time?" You know, he was speaking my first term in the House. But having said that, I really believe Ledbetter, from up in DeKalb County, with that Sand Mountain twang, has got the House really liking him. And I really truly believe people use this bipartisan working relationship thing, and I really do believe he's got a bipartisan working relationship down there. Don't you think that? Having come from the House, McCutcheon was just your speaker.
That's right.
You left to come to the Senate.
That's right.
While
Ledbetter was a
McCutcheon
majority leader at the time, and I sat right behind him. He and Mike Jones. Look, I always found him to be a straight shooter.
That's what I'm thinking.
And he, you know, he's the kind of guy. He's measured. I think if any person would have the ability to balance this thing out, I appreciated how he handled the last day when he came down from the podium. From my understanding and watching, you know, the monitors in the chamber. He does still have, you know, I think he was a mayor of Rainsville.
That's right, he was.
And here's a guy who just still has, you know, that touch that I think people recognize that.
Of course, Anthony does a good job in the House, I think, as far as he works across the aisle.
Correct.
Better than I've ever seen in a long time.
Yeah, there's a lot of interest. I mean, that's an opportunity for people to work together.
You know, speaking of that, you know, Singleton keeps a good attitude, doesn't he? I mean, as far as getting beat all the time, he still keeps coming back. But you have a better attitude than Singleton, really,
you know,
because
he talks about Lil Bobby.
Yeah.
Yeah. He pulled off you know, quite an opportunity for his district with that health science.
He was proud of that.
Oh God.
You know, I think that really came from Bill Poole, though. You know, I really think Bill Poole was from the office. You know
that's
that,
right.
don't you?
That's right.
Well, regardless, it was a good for his district.
That's right.
It was.
That's right.
It was. I saw Poole at the thing the other night, and I was walking out with him. I says, "Poole, your name's all over that Democracy thing." He just kind of smiled and said, "Yeah, I think that's right."
And I found him to be, Bill, you know, because he was chairing the Ways and Means Education when I was there in the House, and Bill was always a straight shooter. The way he could put his head down to really work on numbers and this level of critical thinking really does remind me of our colleague Clyde Chambliss a lot, who's a fantastic guy as well.
Clyde's been quiet this time, hasn't he? But he's working behind the scenes, isn't he?
Clyde's always working.
Yep.
Clyde Chambliss is one of the better legislators, and we've got a bunch. We've got some good ones.
Yes,
y'all sure
Clyde
do.
is a good man and a good legislator.
Yes,
this area has a good cadre. It's you, Will Barfoot, Kirk Hatcher, and Clyde Chambliss. Now, am I missing somebody who's in the Senate from this area?
No, that's
just the three of y'all, huh?
Three for
That's why y'all. I have y'all on every year because I'm still thinking only Montgomery people watch my show. But
you're gonna have to have one more chair because we'd love to have Clyde with us because he like Senator Barfoot saying, Clyde is that what I've known. Again, when you meet people, and the person you met is consistently this individual who, for the most part, you believe can be trusted both in private and in public. These gentlemen, they have that in spades, and I think I feel blessed and lucky that we get an opportunity to work together. The good thing is we can talk back and forth about issues that we may come into a discussion around different positions on things, but at least we know that we're hearing each other.
Right.
And Clyde, being a civil engineer by trade,
That's what
very logical about
That's what
things.
I was going to say. That's exactly what I was going to say. He's probably the only engineer in the city.
I think that
In the legislature, maybe.
Yep.
We bring that up every time he's on the show. He
Great
sort
guy.
of says it adds something to the
Yep.
mix, especially talking about roads. Well, gentlemen, our time's up. I hate to tell y'all that. It goes by in a hurry. We'll do it again later on this year and maybe cover some more things. But what we do is come before the session next year.
Good.
And see if this Gammon thing comes back again, or and see where everything lands
Sounds
and so
good.
forth.
Look forward
Be here
to
before y'all know it.
Oh,
Thank
yeah.
you, gentlemen. Our guests tonight have been Senator Will Barfoot and Senator Kirk Hatcher, who represent the River Region area. We thank you, viewers, for watching. Thank you for tuning in next week for Alabama Politics. Thank you so much.